I don't see the flyer. Do you, or is it just me?
I see it.
We see it.
Yeah, I can see it also.
That's interesting. Oh, here it goes. Welcome. We're going to get started. Again, thank you for your grace. Thank you for your patience. We're so happy to have everyone here tonight to let's talk about mental health across generations. Let's talk about health, mental health across generations and cultures, sorry. And this is a continuation of February's conversation about youth mental health. So this evening's conversation, did someone say something? Okay. This evening's conversation, we're gonna focus on how culture and generational experience shapes the way we talk about and care for our mental health. So in this affirming space, we'll unpack how cultural expectations, internal, intergenerational beliefs, and systematic oppression influences how our communities understand mental health. Together, we'll share stories, raise awareness, and reimagine what healing can look like when we center compassion, understanding, and culturally rooted care. So for today's panelists, we have five wonderful panelists. First, we have Dr. Gail, and then we have, that's Dr. Gail, and then we have, and they're going to introduce themselves here in a minute. And we have Nate, and they'll tell you their roles and organization. We have the wonderful Shania. Am I saying your name right? Shania, welcome. And we have Sun. Welcome aboard. So let's take a few minutes to do introductions. I'm Rosie, by the way. I don't think I even mentioned that. I'm the community engagement specialist at Vital Connections, and I'm really happy to be here with all of you. We're gonna start with just brief introductions. So let's go to Dr. Gale. This question is for all the panelists, but briefly share who you are, your role and organization, how you came to this work. Whenever you're ready, Dr. Gale.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. Glad you're here. Glad everyone made it. So my name is Dr. Gail Crump-Swaby. I am a mental health therapist. I'm also a professor at a college where I teach clinical mental health counseling courses, and I also teach social work courses too as well. And so that's how I came to this work. So my background is within social work and clinical mental health, and I have a small group practice where I provide counseling and also just kind of workshops and presentations, and do a lot of work within the youth population, primarily within some of the Boston public schools. So I love this work. I love working with young people, and that's what brings me today.
Thank you for sharing, Dr. Gale. She was part of the panelists in February, and we're happy to have you back. Let's move on to Nate. Same question, Nate. Briefly share who you are, your role and organization, and how you came to do this work.
Sure. How's it going, everyone? Good evening. My name is Nate. I am the program director for the Center for Teen Empowerment's Boston chapter. Um, and yeah, I've been doing, work with young people for around 8 years now. Really like centering in on, figuring out ways that we can utilize like resources in our communities to uplift youth voice and also you figure out ways that young people and their voices and their experiences can work to shape the community for the future, especially in the most positive ways we can think of together through youth and adult partnership. So that's a little bit about my work, but I've actually come to do this work from serving as like a young person. I worked with the Center for Teen Empowerment as a youth organizer, and continuing my work with them, I've just continued to climb like the leadership ladder within our space. So not only kind of like, absorbing like those messages and like figuring out ways that I can impact my community in a positive way, but then also kind of like turning that on its head and being able to be, an adult leader in that space and continue to engage with our youth to uplift them for the future. So that's a little bit about how I've come to be in the work. But yeah, that's me.
Thank you so much for sharing, Nate. We're happy to have you here. And Natalia, I didn't even mention your name in the beginning because I didn't even see your face on there. And I'm like, hold on, I missed Natalia. But welcome, Natalia. We're happy to have you here. Same question. Briefly share who you are, your role in organization, and how you came to do this work.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. So yeah, my name is Natalia. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and therapist. I own a private practice called Sin Miedo Counseling. So we work with a lot of like first gen clients, immigrant populations, and I've been working with this population for about like 10 years now in different settings, in community health settings, cancer centers, and also university settings. And so really all about like trying to destigmatize mental health and conversations about mental health. So through the practice, we offer a lot of free workshops for the community and partner with local like organizations to do that. So yeah, really excited to be here today.
Thank you, Natalia. We're excited to have you here today. We have two youths on our panelists today, which we're really excited about. Shania, this question's for you and Son, but Shania, if you want to go first, the question is, what got you interested in the topic of mental health?
So mental health has always been something that I've been interested in. And so I'm a senior at Weston High School, and I have always kind of wanted to do social work. And so through exploring like the different things that social workers do, like mental health would often like come up as like a very important topic. And then also for the past year, starting with last summer, I've been working at the Boston Public Health Commission through a program called BAHEC. And so I've learned a lot about mental health through there. I've been teen mental health certified in that first aid. And I've just learned about like the different aspects of health in general and mental health. And it's like really broadened my eyes and allowed me to learn a lot about that. So yeah, it's something I really think is interesting.
Thank you for sharing. We're so happy to have you. Son, welcome. We're happy to have you too. So, same question. What got you interested in the topic of mental health?
Mental health has always been something that has been like intertwined in my life in some way, shape, or form. Most formally, it's been through my job description of a youth program coordinator, and I get to oversee the mental health ambassadors program for teenagers, which has been really fulfilling. We get trained by Dr. Gail and Dawn for mental health first aid, and just watching them adopt these self-care practices, these like internal check-ins with themselves to help promote more mental wellness and just um, how they're better able to either equip themselves with those tools or just better assess how they're doing has been really wonderful. I myself have been fortunate enough to be in therapy for a couple of years now with a Black therapist, and just like helping just like other Black people, other like Black youth as myself, just like I guess tear off the shame of like being able to see a clinician and just like being able to like see how that works has been a really important part of my life.
Thank you so much for sharing. Let's get our conversation started. First, I wanted to like start with a definition. Like this question is directed to you, Dr. Gail and Natalia, but Dr. Gail, let's go to you first. What is mental health? Can you give us a definition of mental health?
Sure. So, mental health, encompasses everything related to, your emotional well-being, your psychological well-being, and of course your social well-being too as well. So it's an inclusivity of all of that. And if our mental health is inclusive of all those three things, then it also connect to our physical health too as well. So it's not just about, how people think or feel and behave, but it's how it impacts our entire system, our holistic parts of who we are, and how we navigate, things that may be challenging for us as well.
Thank you. That was really helpful. Thumbs up, thumbs down in the chat, emoji, anyone that found that helpful. Because sometimes I find most people don't know what mental health is. What really is it? What does it what does it really mean, in terms of mental health? Is it physical? Is it social? Is it emotional? But it's a little bit of everything compiled together. Yeah. And Natalia, would you like to add on anything?
I think Dr. Gale said it so well. I think it is
Yeah.
something that I also think of like as very inclusive in our well-being, and it's kind of like physical health, but you're totally right. Like they intersect and they influence each other very much. So, yeah.
With the Secret Service agents all around him.
Let's move on to question number 3. This is geared towards you again, Dr. Gale. Can you give us a definition of what is intergenerational trauma?
All right. So sometimes we hear things like historical trauma, and then we hear things like intergenerational trauma. And they're not one and the same. They're very different in terms of when we think about intergenerational trauma, we think about trauma. So when you hear things like intergenerational trauma, let's first define what trauma is, right? So it's its manifestations in terms of how people experience certain events and how that interacts with their whole entire system. So the mind, body, spirit kind of system in terms of how that interacts with the person. But when you take it a little bit further and you bring in the word, intergenerational, what intergenerational is that the difference with that is that it refers to the trauma that has been transmitted between 2 or more generations, right? So, for example, I'm like 5th generation of my family because my mother is still alive, right? And so then whatever I experience in terms of any kind of traumatic experiences, if it goes unresolved or unhealed, I can actually pass those beliefs, those values on to my children too as well. So that's when we talk about intergenerational, it means it's passing between 2 or more generations of people. And right now we are 7 generations removed from, the previous generations.
Thank you. That was helpful. I was thinking about some intergenerational trauma that, has been passed on to me, and I'm like, how do I break the cycle?
Mm.
Right. So I think that's important to keep in mind, because a lot of the traumas have been passed on to us. Thank you for that. Our next question is geared towards Nate. So the question is, we covered this during our February community convo, but for those who are just joining us for this community convos, what are you all seeing on the grounds as it relates to youth mental health?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that a lot of young people manifest their um, like their experiences in different ways. Similar to what Gail was mentioning, whether it's, the ways that they interact with the world due to, the trauma that they hold, or in other environments or other areas of their lives where their mental health might be like thriving in the way that they show up. I think that I kind of find myself in a lot of mentorship spaces with our youth organizers. And for a lot of those folks, it's about very like being very like outgoing and find themselves like really like gravitating towards the activities that they love like a lot. Like we work with a lot of folks who are music artists, so they're always wanting to get into the studio. They're always wanting to like freestyle or like kind of like battle rap each other and different things when they're kind of like thriving. But when they're struggling or when they might be experiencing something at home or maybe something that they're coming in with from school that's had a lot of, adverse impact on their mental health, you find them kind of like deviating from those things a lot, where they might be more reclusive or more reserved, listening to their, music in their headphones and not really wanting to engage or be as active in any of the activities or projects that we're working on. And it also impacts the way that they, engage and communicate with each other as well. Some folks it might manifest itself in ways where they're like snapping at each other, not like physically snapping. I mean, sometimes, but like more so like, lashing out at each other and having like a very short like leash with each other. And then again, like on the flip side of that, like just wanting to be super friendly with each other in different ways or wanting to like joke around and engage. What I find sometimes to be the most jarring is that because it varies day to day, again, like we spend only maybe like 3 hours a day with some of our youth. So, we might have a Tuesday where someone's coming in and they're like, they're telling jokes, they're like, being their, super friendly, kind of like more like traditional self. And then like the next day, like those same jokes that they might be telling or those same like, ways that you might engage with them or like more like inappropriate for them based on where they're coming in. You know what I mean? So I think that what I've observed the most, or I'll say kind of like the surmise, is that it varies day to day. I do think that there is like an ongoing mental health epidemic when it comes to young people's well-being. And I think that the city of Boston is doing like a decent job of like addressing that. But I do think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to make sure that young people have I'll call it like sustainable like positive mental health or health, just I think that we need more healthy mental health practices that young people can explore. I also think that we need to figure out ways that adults can model some of those things as well, instead of just kind of like telling them, hey, you need to be doing this and this and this without taking care of themselves as well. Because it's really hard just in general to listen to someone who you can tell doesn't have it together themselves. So throw that in there too.
Sorry, did someone say something? Okay, thank you so much, Nate. Same question for you, son. You're doing work with youths and around mental health. What are you seeing on the grounds as it relates to youth mental health?
Yeah, I've been very blessed to have very civically engaged and aware teenagers this school year. So one of the biggest things that came just like as a topic was talking about handling the results of the election, how that made them feel, because we have our teens range from 14 to 18. One is a senior in high school who's graduating in a couple weeks, which is insane. And then most of them are like sophomores and juniors. So they're like, how is this going to affect how I go to school? And it brings up a big conversation about like, well, how do you like take care of your mental health when you see all of these things happening, things that could possibly affect your future, and how do you navigate and deal with that? Um, so that is what I'm seeing a lot like on the ground as of right now. And then also just a lot of, on like the more hopeful side, a lot of trying new things, a lot of like, ooh, let's experiment. We have our job program where it was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturdays. And Saturdays were our longest days where we called them self-care Saturdays. So we either had a field trip or we have like indoor activities that they can do more just for themselves. The weekdays are more like content heavy with lessons and college and career prep, but we wanted to make sure like they had some designated rest time while they're on the clock. So we have like different exercises that they could do. We made face masks, we made hygiene kits, we did some like nice art therapy, we even did some baking therapy. And just watching them just pick up those and continue them even when they're off the clock and when they're outside of work has been really, really helpful. I know that the mayor released another mental health report for the year. I'm moving through that right now. I haven't completed reading the full report, but we're still watching the effects of COVID and just like the developmental like and societal, I guess like interactions just keep trickling down year after year. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing. Yeah, I definitely do believe like our mental health state of being is constantly shifting, and there's still some, COVID stuff going on that's lingering. in terms of mental health. And I'm glad, just to hear that you guys getting creative about, doing different things for your mental health and trying new things and seeing how that feels. And just, exposing them to new activities and a new way of being that can also support not just their mental health, their overall health and well-being. So good to hear. Yeah. Thank you so much. Let's move on to our next question. We're going to move to our next question, and this is geared towards Shania, and also going to open it up to other people. This question is, how do intergenerational beliefs about mental health differ from between older and younger generations in your community or the people you work with?
Yeah, so
Well, go ahead and I'll go to the next question.
sorry. Thanks for the question.
But go ahead.
So I feel like mental health beliefs like differ like greatly in my community, especially between like different generations, because I feel like right now it's like a lot more prominent that like people like the younger um kids and like the youth in this generation are like learning more about mental health in school and like at their jobs and like on social media and stuff like that. Like it's being made so that it's more not that it's more important because it was still important in the past, but it's like a lot more well known and like promoted, I guess, to the younger generation. And I feel like because of that, it's a lot easier for them to like accept the ideas and like learn a lot from them and like take those ideas and like spread them and like use it to educate others, including their family members and like other people they know from other generations. But when it comes to people from like some of the older generations, maybe people that, like their family isn't from the US, like they immigrated from somewhere else, or they have like a lot of like multi-generational like trauma built up. Sometimes I feel like there can be a stigma around mental health and like mental health conditions. And so oftentimes I see like there are not always sometimes they're not always as willing or open to like listen to those ideas or to like um, just hear more and like truly try and understand like some of the mental health challenges that people face. I mean, even when they are the ones facing it and they know people that are facing it themselves, sometimes it's not easy to like be open-minded to like those ideas because sometimes like sometimes the people in like the older generations aren't necessarily taught to like think positively about that because of that stigma. It's been seen as a negative thing for like a while. And I feel like now it's good that like the younger generations are being taught this is not negative, like it's okay. Mental health is a thing. It can be good, it can be bad. Like there are many different aspects to one's mental health. And especially adding on to what Sun said about like self-care and like making sure that we take care of ourselves and like while it's good to work and be productive, we don't want to overwhelm ourselves and just making sure we have those coping strategies that work for us. I feel like although it may be like not as easy for some people to like listen and like take heed to those strategies and like that information, I feel like over time it's becoming like easier for people to like really open their eyes to it. Yeah.
No, thanks for sharing that. I was thinking like older generation and my mom, and like she doesn't even know what mental health is, right? What does that even look like? And don't even know, and it's hard to explain, what really mental health is. And so it's hard to have that conversation sometimes with older folks. And I'm finding youths are just like so open to talking about mental health and how they're doing and how they're feeling. And I'm seeing a lot of youths using different strategies on how to cope with their mental health, and linking that physical health to mental health, right? Taking care of both, they're all interconnected. So, I really enjoy youths doing this work and stepping up and leading this work around mental health and talking about their own mental health and finding ways to destigmatize mental health, that we all have mental health. And it's just nice to hear youths and talk about their own mental health and ways they're taking care of themselves. So thank you for that. Natalia, same question. How do intergenerational beliefs about mental health differ from between older and younger generations in your community or people you work with? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I was trying to find the unmute button. Yeah, I think, in my work with, youth and also older adults, I definitely see this like change even in like my own community, right? I think older adults, like as you guys are saying, have like different views about mental health. Like sometimes for them, they were, trying to survive and there wasn't as much awareness and like discussion around mental health. There's not like it wasn't as much like social media or conversations about it like we're having now. So it wasn't really normalized. So a lot of times they feel like going to therapy or talking about mental health is like a weakness, or it's like a lack of faith, a lack of strength and emotional strength. And so, I think whereas like with the youth, it's more kind of common to like talk about like, oh, I saw my therapist yesterday, or like I would be like one time I was like walking around and someone said like, oh my God, there's my therapist. And they were like right there with their friends. And so it's been a little bit like it's getting more normalized, which is like really great. And I think um, now, though, like it's like there's a lot of pressure on youth to have these conversations about mental health and to like teach their parents and like the elders in their communities about mental health. And that can be really hard. And so sometimes that can create kind of like some stress. But I mean, it's great that the conversations are starting. And yeah, that's kind of what I've been seeing.
Yeah, it's being normalized more. That's what I'm seeing myself. So it's actually a good thing. We're making progress, right? So, and I find the youths can teach the older generations, and find ways to like really open up conversations about mental health. And really, tell them about like this is nothing to be ashamed of, right? Like we all have mental health and it's okay to talk about our mental health. So thank you so much for that. Let's move on to anybody else wants to jump in and open up to other people. How do intergenerational beliefs about mental health differ from between older and younger generations in your community or the people
Yeah,
you're working with? Jump in.
I'd definitely love to kind of like chime in on this. One of the things that I've observed, that I think, Shania, you kind of, emphasized it a little bit, when you were speaking about, there's a lot of like language that I think that young people have access to that a lot of older folks don't necessarily have access to because it's not what they were kind of like brought up speaking about. And then Natalia, when you mentioned that, at points it can almost be seen in some ways as like maybe like a sign of weakness to like admit like you're having like, any like adverse or like deteriorating mental health. I'll say like some people will take that as like, you just gotta like, have thicker skin or like, tough it out or whatever it might be for older generations. But I do think that one thing that I've observed as well is that older generations have a lot of very like healthy coping mechanisms that have been utilized for like generations upon generations that are very sustainable, that are that young people are kind of like learning about as well, but really just putting language behind it. You know what I mean? And I think that that's like a generational divide that young people are helping to like bridge the gap on, making sure that folks have like terminology for the things that they are experiencing, whether it's things like, we hear about anxiety so much, but I think that like anxiety is, like a spectrum of things that can happen, you know what I mean? Or a spectrum of feelings that you might have in the way that you react and respond to different things, based on like Gail was mentioning before, the different traumas that you hold, right? But without kind of like, I feel like without so many young people kind of like speaking up about their like anxiety as we see on like TV or as we see in like media or we see in like, music, as well, then, a lot of older folks wouldn't have like the language to put behind it. But because it's there, because it's so prominent now, I feel like they're able to learn, a lot. And then kind of like that reflects as well, in the way that and I put myself in like, I'm still like younger, but I put myself in kind of like an older generation just because I know a lot of like my friends have like kids. They're folks that I went to like middle school with who like I'm seeing some of their, children who are like 12 and 11 and stuff like that, who are like, coming to the events. I'm like, you're getting old. This is interesting. But I'm seeing them and I'm just seeing that their parents are now more aware and in tune with their own mental health and their own like self-care practices. And a lot of it stems from the way that they know they want to make sure that they're around for their kids to be able to do the same, and they can sometimes teach them. So that's been interesting. But that's kind of like one way that I've seen it in like a reflection piece. There's a lot of language that young people are learning that is able to kind of then be, taught to some of the older folks, or at least, put some of the language to some of the practice that's already there.
Yeah, I like that because the younger folks can teach the older folks, and the older folks can teach the younger folks, right? Like, I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, son.
I
Yes,
think
chime
I
in.
think Nate made an excellent point in terms of language and as Shania said too as well, because if you think about the older generation, anxiety is not something that was in their vocabulary, but nervous was definitely in their vocabulary, right? And those two are very much the same. So they may say, well, your Auntie Joan had a nervous breakdown, but Auntie Joan might have had a panic attack. Auntie Joan might have had anxiety that led to the quote unquote the nervous breakdown, right? So I think they are aware of, mental health kinds of things. However, the stigma that's attached to the negativity of that word, the nervous breakdown. So then, therefore, that makes it difficult for them to conceptualize that, yes, my young person is also having these things that are similar to maybe what they Auntie Joan had experienced, and they don't want to make that kind of connection. Again, in terms of, people may say, you know, they may have, said, well, I feel overwhelmed and I feel sad, but then now young people may use depressed, right? So then, so it's how do we help both generations to really understand that they are speaking the same language, but they're using different idioms in order to express their feelings and how they're experiencing it. Right. And going back to the coping mechanism, they use things like laughter, humor, dance, music, food, right, as a way to bring folks together to help cope. So they may cook a really grand meal. Parents may say to their kids, when you think back in terms of older generations, child may be saying, to their current, the current young person may be talking about feeling depressed. And, the parent may say, if they're an older generation, may say, well, I'll cook you your favorite meal. Because that's how they think about coping and taking care of, your well-being and your mental health. So it is a form of coping. However, there still needs to be some understanding about being able to talk through while you're eating your food as well, right? So how do we help them to make those connections with each other so that they don't feel like they're so far apart, because they are really connected in terms of how they're thinking about, taking care of themselves, while at the same time, we do need to talk about these feelings that we are experiencing.
At the table with some really good food.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right, right. That's part of our mental health and, taking care of our overall mental health, and well-being, and just normalizing it, right? At the table, like, I'm nervous, but really I'm anxious, right? I'm worried, but I'm really stressed out, just providing. I find younger people can really provide the language that a lot of older people don't have, and they can help normalize it and make it feel like, less shameful about talking our mental health. Love that.
I'd like to share something. My name is Dee Dale, and I've been a clinician and an educator for a long time. I've had the pleasure of working with Dr. Gail Schwabe. She is the director of the Department of Counseling and Psychology, where we were at Springfield College. And a couple of things I want to clarify. You've talked about language. You've talked about so many things. I'm excited to be with you, first of all, to see all these young people who are doing wonderful things and have such great insight. And I can feel the energy. Thank you, Nate. Thank you, Shania. Thank you, son. I can feel your energy and your genuineness, and it's just touching because I know I'm getting ready to get out of it. I had 2 cases last week that literally burnt me out. And I can say that now, as strong as I am, I'm able to admit when I need nourishment. And of course, I run to Dr. Gale and to other people. A couple of points I want to make. And number one, we can't just slide over definitions and assume that we all understand it. And one of the most enlightening experiences I've had in the past, say, 5 years is Dr. Gale's book. And I think it's all important for us if we want to clearly understand what intergenerational trauma is to look at this unlocking legacies and releasing burdens. This is so helpful if you want to understand the depth of intergenerational. Easy reading. It's brief, but it's concise and it's stimulating, and it gives examples not only from her personal life, but about life and examples of scenarios and situations that is really stimulating and informative. I like what you said, Nate, and what everybody seems to be agreeing with is the level of education that is necessary. Yes, the youth have information and terminology, but they need more. And in our curriculums, programs, whether they be formal or informal, we have to concentrate on the education of mental health. For instance, it's important for young people to learn character development, decision-making skills, and critical thinking. And that's the basis for them being able to establish an understanding of mental health and mental illness. I'm not afraid to say the word mental illness because this is not all about mental health. We do have mental illness, and they have to have some understanding of that because they're working with gender identity issues, the impact of public media, interpersonal relationships, and family conflicts. And they're old and they're new. And it's not just because families of different generations don't know how to communicate with them. Those of us who are working with youth now and training youth, we want to emphasize, as Dr. Gale has always done with us, issues of character development, decision-making process, and critical thinking. Now, as you can see, I was vaccinated with a phonograph needle. I could go on forever, but I'm gonna stop there because I want to hear more from other people, and then I can chime in again at some other point. But I really, really wish you would consider getting a good foundation on what intergenerational trauma is all about by getting Dr. Gale to get off of her modesty and just share this book. It's just so precious, and it makes it a concise focus on what we need to know. Okay, I'm gonna stop right there. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your insight. That was helpful. Thank you so much. Thanks for the recommendation.
Yeah.
It's in the chat. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Let's move on. So we kind of started a little late, and I forgot to mention we're gonna end just a little bit early, part of like 7:05 for questions. Feel free to put questions in the chat, but we'll have time if people want to come off mute and ask a question. Let's move on to our next question. Gail, we're going back to you, Dr. Gale. So in our February community convo, we focused on youth mental health, as we know. And one of the topics that came up was the importance of respecting elders. How do you see this value showing up or causing tension when it comes to approaching mental health across generations?
Yeah, I remember that coming up during the February panel discussion, and us not getting an opportunity to explore it a little bit further or to expand on it a little bit more. That's one of the things that we often hear from the older generation in regards to young people, and feeling as though they are that the issue of respect is important, which I agree with 100%, right? Because respect has to go both ways. And going back to what one of my colleagues just mentioned around, we have to teach children and young people around character development, decision making, and critical thinking. So those things are important, and those things lead to an ability to be respectful. However, we also have to look at it on the flip side of that too, in terms of, we have often believed and experienced or have experienced that respect only goes in one direction. And I think that's where the challenge comes in, because we were, so I'm gonna take it to this level, right? As Black and brown folks, right? If you think back in terms of, I'm gonna go even further from intergenerational trauma to historical traumas and the historical impact of how we think about relationships with each other and how we think about relationships with an adult and a young person or a young adult. And I'm not saying that, respect is not necessary or it's not needed, but it's really important for us to think about how we think about respect based on those historical values and belief patterns that were transmitted onto us because our Black and brown folks were enslaved. Right.
Yes.
So that's where that belief might have come from in terms of respect should only go one way. Because when you think of our ancestors, the previous generations that were enslaved, respect only went one way in terms of, the colonizer or the slave master expected, our ancestors to only be respectful to them, but they were not respectful to the folks that were enslaved. So that was sort of, in a lot of ways, brainwash in our ancestors, which now created a mental enslavery. So we carry those values and beliefs about what respect looks like based on those past experience. So not only do we have intergenerational traumatic experiences that are being transmitted, we have the historical traumatic experiences that are being transmitted. A lot of times parents and I have these conversations with parents because I don't want parents to feel as though, or adults or, the older generation to feel as though that they don't deserve respect or they shouldn't be respectful. But I try to help them understand where those beliefs might be coming from in terms of how they think about respect, the same way in terms of how they think about disciplining children as well, because those disciplinary practices came from the
Yes.
colonizers and the our ancestors that were being enslaved. So we believe that that was the way to discipline our children. That was the way to talk to our children. The slave master believed that, the folks who were enslaved should be seen and not heard. So they didn't get an opportunity to speak to, if they were feeling tired, if they were feeling sad, if they were feeling angry, or whatever feelings that they might be feeling. In addition to that, when our ancestors who tried to run from the slave master, they were diagnosed with a mental health disorder for trying to escape harmful practices, right? Or trying to escape being disrespected, being harmed, being abused, all those kinds of things. So then, therefore, those beliefs and values are trapped in our mental capacity. So then, therefore, we then begin to parent our children the way we were parented and how our previous generations were parented and how those previous generations were enslaved based on that. So I think that's the conversation that needs to happen. So I'm not saying that parents are, and oftentimes people are not aware of the fact, where is this coming from? How do we begin to question, where are we getting these beliefs about these practices? Because even in African countries, I've visited several, the practices of disciplining our children the way that we were taught to do it was also brought to those African countries from the colonizers who went there and had us believe that that's the way we discipline, or ways in which we should demand respect, but not give respect. So we need to really look at, you know, digging a little deeper. Where's the root of all of this coming from? And where do we begin to dismantle, break down, change, and shift those kinds of thinking so then now we can be in community with each other without believing that we have to respond and act the way that we do, because in a lot of ways we are not chained, physically, but we are chained mentally. And how do we really unchained from that?
Thank you so much, Dr. Gill. That was so rich. We needed that. I felt like I'm not gonna ponder too much on it because we don't have much time. But thank you so much for sharing that. Anybody else wants to jump in with that question? How do you see, sorry. How do you see
The,
this value showing up, causing tension when it comes to approaching mental health across generations?
yeah, I'd love to just
Yeah, go ahead.
say thank you, Gail, for mentioning that, Dr. Gail, because I think that is super important. A lot of, yeah, it's just something that comes up so much. With teen empowerment, we believe in like the power of like youth and adult partnership, where in order to really like create change, like we have a fundamental belief that it's not going to be able to happen on a holistic level or on a sustainable level unless young people, adults, elders are all working together in order to create it. Just because we don't have the resources individually, we don't have the capacity individually to do it on our own. And so I definitely think that a lot of young people have, they have very little opportunity because they're living within such conditional relationships on such a consistent basis, whether it's in school where it's like you'll get kicked out of school for not doing what you're told. You can't be in this environment if you don't conform to this environment. And the same thing with their households a lot of times, unfortunately, right? Or even with their friendships or with their interpersonal relationships, with their romantic relationships. And it's very unfortunate. So I think that it's hard to grasp this idea of like a partnership being something where folks are, giving all of themselves to, the project or to the relationship itself, and like really working to make things work, meaning that there has to be a foundational level of respect on both ends, or on all ends, depending on how many, people are involved in the partnership in general. And so I think that that's something that's really difficult, but it shows up or the way that it shows up is that a lot of young people are distrustful of like adults, whether they've been quote unquote like burnt or they've been like let down in the past by adults in their lives, or because of these conditional relationships, they've developed trust issues, and like issues or difficulties developing fruitful relationships on their end. And I think it's the same thing that we see with adults at points too. So I think that that's one way that it manifests, but I do think on, the term and topic of respect, what I'd love to see moving forward is that we build some of those relationships that are less conditional and that are more based on not necessarily like judgment, but love. That's something that like my mom always used to say is like no judgment, just love. When she was like approaching us if we got like in trouble in school or like anything like that, just to make sure that there was an idea in our minds that like, we're not in trouble. We have to figure out a solution together though if we're gonna move forward, if we're gonna figure out anything. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
Yeah. And we have to be reminded too that, parenting is a hard job. It's not easy because it doesn't come with any kind of, handbook or manual. And then if you have two children, the manual and the handbook will definitely look different because they're very different, right? So parenting is a hard job, and parents are trying to do the best they have with what they know and how they were parenting. So they're using those same skills too as yet. So as well. So we have to be reminded that, you have two groups of folks just trying to make it and navigate, life challenges in whatever way that they can. And so I don't want parents to walk away from here feeling as though, we're just focusing on the young people, because we are aware of the fact that there are challenges that parents have. Parenting is a very difficult job, and you may have, trying to make sure that you are putting food on the table, making sure that there's housing, making sure that there's clothing, and all the injustices that is in our world today or in our country today gets in the way of parents to really sit and find time with, just having these very hard and difficult conversations, right? So I want to make sure that we are, being mindful that it's a challenge for both sides, and it's really important that we begin to break down the walls that someone put up for us because it's not our walls.
Yeah.
So then, therefore, we need to make sure that we are shifting the narrative in terms of what it means to be in communication with our young people. So that has to be with, as Nate said, how do we do it from a place of love? No shame, no blame, no judgment, right? Those are the three most important things to have in open communication.
Yeah, just building, that unconditional love and mutual respect amongst each other. And I always say this, like, parents are doing the best that they can do with the resources they have available, right? So just want to leave that at that since we're running out of time. We want to probably two more questions. We're gonna go back to Natalia. This question's geared towards you. So the question is, what are some of the misconceptions or limiting beliefs you often hear about mental health, particularly those rooted in language or cultural norms?
Thanks for that question. So I think like we were like talking about before, like there's a lot of like language around, mental illness and mental stress about being weak or lack of strength. And so oftentimes we hear a lot of people feeling like, okay, I'm not doing enough. I need to do better. I need to work harder. I need to be stronger in order to like support my own mental health or my family's mental health. And there's a lot of pressure on that. I think sometimes we are not only thinking about ourselves, but also our family units, our communities. And so there's a lot of like stress. It's like, okay, I really do need to be strong. And so I see that a lot in clients. And so we want to work around being more compassionate with ourselves, knowing that that's like way easier said than done, and kind of figuring out like what, I guess, like for lack of better terms, like acceptance around like these like feelings and emotions coming up for people looks like, right? Like how can we develop a different relationship with the stress that you're having, the anxiety that you're having, and so to create like new language around it, if that makes sense. And so, sorry, I'm forgetting the latter part of the question, but
I can just say, what are some
yeah.
misconceptions or limiting beliefs you often hear about mental health, particularly those rooted in language or cultural norms?
Right. Yeah. So, especially for the cultural norms, I think there's a lot of like, even like in Spanish, right? We have different phrases for different things, and it's very like culturally rooted. And so it can be really hard, right? Not to like stigmatize it or to like normalize it. But we are working to like, I don't know, I think all of us here, it sounds like we're trying to work towards like normalizing it more and having more conversations just like this, I think can be really helpful in like beginning to talk about these conversations and like mental health.
Thank you so much for that, Natalia. I appreciate that. We don't have much time, but I have one last question that I must ask because this is really important, just like the rest, but considering time, want to give people time, the panelists to answer any questions people have. This question is geared towards Nate, and others can also jump in. What are some ways young people can initiate a conversation about mental health with parents, caregivers, or an adult in their life, especially when it feels hard and taboo? What are some strategies you have used when supporting young people?
So I'll try to keep it brief, but I think that one of the biggest things that we've been implementing with teen empowerment has been, figuring out space for trusted adults to kind of like come into play. I think sometimes, especially from, like when engaging like from a youth and adult like kind of like level, the platform feels very like uneven. Sometimes young people are at like a power disadvantage when it comes to addressing like something with their parents, and sometimes adults can feel like they're at a power disadvantage when there's like two or three young people trying to convey a message to them all at once. And so what we found is that there, in order to find the middle ground, there's usually something called like a trusted adult. It might be like an older sibling, or it might be, a guidance counselor or a mentor, someone that has like a relationship with both the parent and the child who can kind of sometimes help to, guide that conversation along, almost serve as like a mediator between the two parties so that, the parents have an opportunity to voice their concerns and their thoughts, but also on the flip side of that, the young people have an opportunity to like get their point across as well and really like come to a level of understanding together, especially when it comes to conversations around mental health. Because not to say that, parents are unaware, sometimes things just like fly past their radar, you know what I mean, when it comes to things that their young person is dealing with or their child is dealing with. So I think that that's one of the bridges, as youth and is trusted adults as kind of like a mediator. But, similar to Mary, I'd love to hear Shania and Son, you
Yeah,
guys' thoughts on this.
thanks. Yeah, jump in. I was gonna say chime in, Shania, son.
Mhm.
Yeah, so some ways that we've helped initiate conversations. Wait, is my mic okay? Because
Yeah.
it's okay. Okay, I know because sometimes my AirPods get a little wonky. Okay, so some ways that we've initiated conversations is that our organization has like two really big focuses, which is youth work, and then the other is neighborhood engagement. So we have mental health efforts on both fronts. So it's not just for the youth. We have this space. We have two spaces in neighborhood engagement called Can We Talk, which is a place where neighbors can come. It's every third Wednesday at the community room. There's a meal, and it's just a space where people can come and unburden themselves. And nobody gives any advice back to them. No one is trying to like therapize them. It's just a place for them to just, share what's going on in their lives. And then the other space is called Tea Time, which actually started all the way back in 2019, where neighborhood women were like, we need a space like just for ourselves, to just talk about what's going on in the community. Because in the area I work in, we have, of course, like a lot of lovely neighborhood engagement, a lovely like neighbor or not even neighborhood engagement, but civic groups, and neighborhood groups. So that all come together to talk about what's going on in the neighborhood. But very often, not a lot of our community are like women, our moms, our aunts, grandmothers. So just having a space like just for them to come and just be like unburden themselves. But some things that we started structuring into those events are different like different tactical, I guess, experiences. So as they're talking, or just listening, they're doing something that kind of helps them release that energy as well. But for the youth part, how can they start a conversation? We do our best to equip the teenagers with knowledge either from like I always advocate for Psychology Today. I love that website. If you want to find a therapist in your area, either like in person or online, and you can filter it by race, gender, sexual orientation, and insurance. That's how I found my therapist.
Mhm.
Just making sure all that information is accessible to them because they feel more confident and more prepared when they go and ask certain questions. Or I'm close enough in age, or all the coordinators are close enough in age with the teenagers where they're like, hey, I'm thinking about having this conversation. Is this something that you've gone through before? And if you have, like, how did you navigate it? Which has also been like a really big help for them. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was great information. Yeah, psychology. Yeah, I've been on there before, like searching for like therapists. So that's good information. It's in the chat now, so someone shared it, which is a great directory to search for therapists of color and cultural background. So feel free to hit that. It looks like we're right on time, a little over. Sorry, we started a little late. I think we got through most of the questions. So, yep, Cheyenne, yeah, good. Shania?
Sorry about the noise in the background. There's a train station behind my house,
Okay.
but okay. It sounds like it's gone now. But I just wanted to like add on a little bit before we move on. So, Son, your answer is very interesting. So for me, how I like have kind of helped to start some of these conversations, like through my job at Bayhec, like we learned about like the different signs of like when someone like doesn't have like good mental health or like maybe going through like depression or something like that, like during our like teen mental health first aid training. And we learned about like just being like more curious and just like being more aware of like what's going on around us instead of like observing others and being like, oh, well, maybe so and so like isn't having a good day today, or like why does like my peer or like classmate or like this specific student like always look kind of sad or like never really like seem to be engaged. Maybe like start a conversation with them, maybe like ask them how their day was going, and if they say it's not going well, like ask them like what about their day like wasn't going well. Just kind of like trying to stay engaged with them and just like be curious, like get to know more. And then also in my school community, so there's a group at my school called DEI Alliance, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Alliance. And so through that group, it's not specifically like focused on mental health, but it is just like a safe space where like students of like all backgrounds can come together and like share anything about their experiences, because like I do go to a predominantly white school, so oftentimes like students of color like will gather together and like talk about like what they've experienced at their school, well at our school, and things that they felt like weren't okay, maybe like microaggressions and stuff like that, and like how that made them feel like over time. So yeah, and then also the Black Student Union, me and a couple of my peers like helped to run it at my school, and it's just like another way that we can help to create like a safe space for like Black and brown people, and just like working to make sure that like everyone feels supported and like encouraged, and like we're all in this together. So it's kind of like we have like a shared sense of belonging, and just making sure we check in and check up on each other and be there for each other.
No, I love that, because it's different when you're around people that look like you. You can kind of like be your full authentic self and kind of voice really how you're feeling. So finding that sense of community
Mhm.
is so vital. So I get it. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your knowledge, your insight. We really appreciate it. We're going to move into questions. There was a few, and if people want to like come off mute and feel free to raise their hand, well, actually raise your hands and then maybe, I'll call your name and you can come off mute. But there was a question in the chat actually. Okay, here's a question. Is there work being done in schools where school staffs, oh, okay, I thought that was me. Is there work being done in schools where school staffs are being trained to better handle slash support youth mental health? This question can go to anyone, really.
I can take the first part of that question. So, um, Boston Project has a connection with Tech Boston Academy in Dorchester. So we come in every month to do mental wellness tables, and it happens during all of the lunch periods. So we're there for like a couple hours. And they can come to the table, get there like get whichever like I don't know. It's every month is a different theme. So Thursday, not Thursday, April, not April. Oh my gosh. May. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So our entire board and table was dedicated to just that. We were making ribbons because the color of the month is green. We always have these like textured stickers that have breathing exercises on them that are relatively inexpensive on Amazon and stuff. Sign up for like teen nights, just different like community stuff that they can get involved in too, as well as like different like worksheets and stuff if they wanted to complete like a gratitude gallery, or it's a word search about like different like positive qualities and affirmations, like things like that. Um, in April we helped them plant flowers and stuff. So just giving them the seeds to go get it going, because another part of like mental wellness or just like another self-care activity is taking care of plants. We gave them wildflowers, so they're pretty like easy. They're good for beginners. But we've had teachers and administrators like not know exactly where to start, but know where to like find the places that are doing it already and come and like allowing them to come into their space, which I found to be the most like successful. When last Thursday, I believe, Tech Boston, they had their like mental health awareness fair. So they had all these wonderful community organizations come in. So it was people from Common Square Health Center, like from all different like branches of it. So they're not only just taking care, because like you said before, mental health is not just for your mind, it's also for your physical as well. So if all those things are working together, it can make that treatment just that more impactful. Um, and yeah, but one thing I did want to add on from before was that therapy isn't just like sitting down and talking to someone. And even psychology today, they have different forms of therapy. There's EMDR, which is like light and like memory retention therapy. There's art therapy where you're just painting. There's physical therapy where you're just moving your body. And like, yeah, there are just some pretty flexible and interdisciplinary, there we go, therapists too that kind of just like help that just like help you when you find an activity that helps you just like stay balanced, they'll work with you to yeah, like what Valerie said, very like many healing modalities. But yeah, just to wrap everything up, a lot of schools are finding the organizations that are already doing the work and inviting them in so they can grow those partnerships to either like adopt it themselves and continue the work or just like making them a part of, you know, their healing plan.
Yeah, inheriting all that great therapy, ecotherapy, art therapy, dance therapy, physical. There's so many ways to take care of your mental health. So I love that. I think, hold on, I gotta go back up to the question. Anybody wants to get off mute, maybe ask a question, but it's, you know, it's open, the floor is
Can
open.
I actually asked the question. I was wondering specifically for like elementary schools, with kids presenting, you know, quote unquote behaviors, right? And how are they being supported, with their mental health? And what resources are out there, or if there is any training being offered, to schools dealing with children, with behavioral problems. Well, that's what they're labeling it as.
Mhm.
So a lot of schools, yeah, so in the elementary schools, they have the social emotional learning curriculum that they integrate into the school day in whatever way that they can. So that's how they often you know um, introduce things around mental health and wellness for younger children. They start with the social emotional learning in terms of how do you engage with a friend or a peer, and really giving them an opportunity to really speak or you know, express their feelings in the ways in which they can. So they're teaching kids about their own social and emotional beings. Of course, that's a little bit, it's not as in-depth as looking at mental health per se. And I know a lot of schools are also trying to make sure that they're, working with children from a trauma-informed lens. And the trauma-informed lens gives, teachers an opportunity to really not so much focus on the behavior, but focus on, what's happening in this child's life that is making them exhibit these kinds of behaviors. So that's what the trauma-informed lens is. So it's not to blame the child for their behavior, but look at what's causing the behavior, what's happened to this child that has, have them acting out, have them not being able to stay focused in class, not being able to, keep their hands off of another, peer or anything of that sort. So that's the direction it's sort of going within the school setting. And a lot of teachers are trained on the social emotional learning curriculum in terms of being able to navigate and manage their classrooms in a different kind of way. So that's what they're doing within the schools, especially with elementary age children. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I direct message you, by the way, Gail, if you don't mind.
Oh, okay. Yes,
We
yes,
got a
yes.
hand
I
up.
see it.
Two hands up. Lily, did I say it right?
Yes, ma'am. I'm so sorry. This has been wonderful information. I just want to thank all you young people for being able to share about dealing with trauma with young people. I have a lot of young people that comes into my home through foster care, and a lot of those kids come in with a lot of trauma. And I listened to some of the strategies that Nay gave concerning how to make a conversation. They know they have issues. They know that they need to talk, but they feel like they different. So they don't want to share, with others. So I thank you for the strategies that you gave. And I did refer to his mentor and the things that I felt like I couldn't get through. He was very connected to his mentor, and they was able to kind of like, wiggle through some of it. Yeah. And I know the time is running, but back to the schools, I had a child that was in the school system, and I went to try to let the teachers know that bad weather, storming weather triggers him. And I wanted to let them know if there's some kind of weather during school, this is what you do. They don't pay no attention to me. And they had a bad storm one day, thundering, lightning. The kid just freaked out and just started screaming and hollering in school. And they calling me saying he's acting up. I said, he's not acting up. It's the weather, So I tried to go back and talk to them. But I feel the teachers needs to be kind of like a little bit more educated in trying to understand the child, especially if a parent come and say, this is one of my child's triggers, and I've experienced that. So, but I thank you, Nay, and I can't remember the other young lady's name for the information that was shared.
Shania and Son.
Yes, thank you.
I'd also like to thank I didn't mention her name, but all this information is so good. I just wish we could have this interchange on a more frequent basis. I know everybody's busy and tied up, but this is refreshing and it's encouraging too. And if we could know in advance what you may be interested in and do a little preparation, I'd be glad to support it. But I've enjoyed this and I thank you very much. And I thank you, Dr. Shwaiby, for asking me to attend.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, very good information. I actually went and took a trauma class, a 7-week trauma class, just to try to understand triggers. And one of the triggers that I found out that the child that I was dealing with, which I didn't know the word no. I had to find another way to tell him he couldn't do something instead of using the word no, because but if you say, okay, we can do this, but we're not going to be able to do it right now, and give him a reason, he was okay. But if I just say flat out, he just went off into a hissy fit, so it was little things that I found that was very helpful to me. So if I can be involved in more of these kind of programs to learn, what are the triggers, how to help these children, because, I deal with a lot of them and I see the trauma, and I'm not a therapist, so I can't help no more and just talk to them.
Certainly, thank you, Miss Lily, because that's very strong and brave of you. You're making a very important contribution to the world, and we admire you for taking in one. And let me tell you, I bet you've taken in a lot, in directly and indirectly, and what you do is so valuable. Thank you so much.
Over 300 kids.
Go to the next step of going to classes is precious. Thank you, Ms.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Oh my God. This is this conversation has really filled my heart. Like, this was important conversation, impactful, it was rich. It was, I can go on and on, empowering, inspiring, like more conversations like this. I totally agree, Dee.
I feel the emotion too.
Yeah, a lot of things coming up. So We're coming to an end. Unfortunately, I felt like it was so fast. We needed another hour to keep going and talking about this. So sorry if we couldn't get to all your questions, but we wanted to close out by hearing from you. There's a survey in the chat from my colleague Mary. We want to hear from you. Take a minute. We have about 2 minutes. Let's do three, hopefully 3 to 4 minutes, going over a little bit, but we did start a little bit late. So feel free to take a few minutes just to hit that link, the survey link, fill it out. We would love to hear about what else do you want to talk about? Is this something, you want to talk about again? So
One second, y'all. That was the wrong link. And so I'm just
sorry.
grabbing it right now.
We would love to know what other conversation you'd like us to focus on moving forward.
So
Okay.
I just wanted to answer a quick question. I think someone put it in the
Is this
chat.
the last link at the
Feel free.
end?
Yep, you can feel free to do that, Dr. Gill, while people are filling out the
Yes,
survey.
please fill out the survey.
Right now, right now.
Right now.
Yes, right now, yes. Someone asked about what are the signs and symptoms of PTSD in children. So the signs and symptoms, again, when it comes to PTSD, the only folks who can really diagnose, because it's a mental health disorder and diagnosable disorder. So it has to be done by a licensed clinical mental health counselor or a licensed independent clinical social worker or psychologist. So just to make that clear before I go into what the signs and the symptoms are. So some of the signs and symptoms you may find, especially in children, is that they continuously is reminded or is reliving the traumatic experience that they have experienced or the event. So it can happen in their play. So you'd probably see it in children's play in terms of if they've experienced any kind of traumatic experience or event. The other thing is that they may have sleep difficulties. They may have nightmares. They may have difficulty falling asleep at night. They may wake up in the middle of the night based on a nightmare. So that's the other thing. They may easily get upset over something that triggers them. So I think it was Lily who said there was a child who, the word no would trigger them. So that's one of the things that you have to think about, knowing what the triggers are, what is activating that part of their brain and their bodies based on that traumatic event. Because what happens is that when someone experiences a traumatic event, it not only it doesn't only show up in terms of how they're thinking about it, it shows up in their bodies too as well. So they may not be thinking about that particular activity, that particular event, but if when that event happened, their body reacted a particular way, they can get triggered, but the body is the one that's responding to the event that happened because that's what happened when the event happened. They may not have a lot of, positive emotions. They may do things, may be sad all the time or have difficulty regulating their emotions, and they may have a lot of angry outbursts. So that's why it's important to really get a sense of what happened to this kid if they're, in the classroom and they're knocking chairs over or, they're having difficulties in terms of regulating their emotions. It could be that the classroom is triggering for them. It could be that something the teacher said or the way the teacher is standing or the way the teacher is talking to another student can be triggering for anyone. So it's really important to pay attention to those signs and symptoms, but going back to the only one who can really diagnose, the PTSD is a mental health professional who can definitely do that.
Thank you so much for answering that question. I did see it on the chat, but I'm glad you picked it up because I thought it was an important question. Thank you so much. I appreciate everyone on this call. Thank you for coming. Thank you to all the panelists. You guys were really great. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your knowledge, your wisdom. I can go on and on.
And a shout out to all the young people who are on it because they're the ones who are leading the way with
Yes.
really talking about mental health and making sure that it's being talked about and normalized. So I just want to say thank you to the young folks who are on this panel.
Thank you so much. Yes, we appreciate all of you. Well, I really hope everyone has a good night and take good care of themselves until we convene again.
Okay, hope to see you.
Good night.
Good
Thank you
night.
guys again.
Good night. Thank you all.
Bye.
Have a great night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you all.